All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Bexley Public Library. My name is Ben Heckman. I am hey, that's a great t-shirt back there. I am the library director, and it's great to have you all here in person and online. So I want to thank you for joining us for this important topic. So for a number of years, we've had a series of programmings called The Current, where if something's happening in the world, we try to get some experts here very quickly after it happens so that people can ask questions and try to understand what's going on in the world or in the community that we're in. And so we were having conversations about all the changes happening in Columbus. So we came up with this series called The Next Chapter. And it's hopefully looking at things that are happening in our community or will be happening in our community as we look at the growth and the things that are going on. And that led us to the doorstep of this beautiful human being here, Michael Wilkos. This is our third time doing this. He came and spoke to us 2 other times for our Next Chapter series. So this is our third one. We're talking about transportation here in Columbus and the surrounding communities. And so we're excited to do that. I think that we are going to potentially take the summer off. We have a little bit of a birthday that's happening here at the library. That's our give it up for Zach Parrish over there on the 1s and 2s. He laughed when I said we had a small birthday coming up because we've been working on it for like 8 months. So the library is turning 100 and we're celebrating this summer. And I'm going to talk to you about a few of those programs. But I think the idea we have is maybe revisit this series again in October and talk about housing. We'll have a panel here about housing. We're going to work with Michael about that. So we're going to continue these series as long as he will let us, until he says no more, with the Bexley Public Library with Zach and Ben. And so to kick off some of our celebration for our 100th birthday here at the library, we are having a live playing of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, played right here in the auditorium by Tony Haygood on Sunday, April 14th at 3 o'clock. And then the big kickoff is April 25th here at the library at 6 o'clock. We're going to have some cake. We're going to have some previous staff members here. We're going to dedicate part of the building. And then I am going to interview Roosevelt Montas and talk about his book, Saving Socrates, how the great books can impact our lives and improve our lives here still today. So we hope you'll join us for that. And with that, we'll get this thing started. It's my great honor to introduce the Ben from the other side of Main Street, Mayor Ben Kessler.
Thank you, Better Ben. So I'm Mayor Ben, and I have the privilege of introducing our key speaker this evening. I first heard Michael Wilkos speak to a group of other mayors and city managers in Central Ohio a few years ago. And we get together once a month, and we shoot the breeze and talk about local politics stuff, but mostly we talk about policy, and we talk about trends, and we talk about what's going on in our region and our state. And so we hear a lot about housing. We hear a lot about transit. But I got to hand it to Michael. His presentation, Don't Get a Big Head, was by far the most insightful and interesting and illuminating of any that I've ever seen since or before or since. And so started talking with Ben and the folks over here at the library as we were talking about how do we really bring our community to thinking more and more about topics of housing and what it means to have been a historically blue-lined community and the growth of transit in Central Ohio. And I mentioned Michael's name, and they did all the work, so I take no credit for that. Other than that, I think you're in for a real treat this evening. I also want to say that the topic tonight is incredibly timely. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but there is an issue on the ballot in November for Link Us. I'm allowed to say that? I'm not saying pro or con, I'm just saying there's an issue. And one of the routes, as you're about to hear about and talk about, is coming down Main Street here in Bexley. And transit and a robust, equitable transit system is vital to the growth of our region. We will not thrive and survive as a region through the next trends that are to come without a emboldened transit system. And so I think the conversation tonight is incredibly timely. Following this event, at some time, I don't know if we have a new date yet, but Ride the Bus with Ben, do we have a date? No. Is coming up in the coming months, probably a month or two. Keep an eye on your Bexley Blast. We're going to do an event where I like to have different ways that you can heckle me as your mayor. So I just came from a trash talk on Livingston. We have 2 more or two or three more trash talks coming up in April as part of Earth Month and throughout the year, where if we pick up trash together, we can heckle each other. This one will be on a bus. We'll learn about the future of transit in Columbus as we take a ride downtown. We're going to do something fun and come back on one of COTA's 100% green electric buses. So keep your eye out for that. And I'm supposed to actually formally introduce you, Michael. So Michael is the Senior Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of Central Ohio. His team develops effective strategies to improve our communities. Prior to joining United Way, Michael was the Director of Community Research at the Columbus Foundation. During his tenure at the foundation, he initiated, led, and managed more than $9 million in competitive grant making to support holistic community revitalization in Wineland Park, an effort to stabilize and revitalize a mixed income community near The Ohio State University. Before working at the Columbus Foundation, Michael served as Senior Impact Director and Director of Neighborhood Development at United Way of Central Ohio. And above and beyond all that, as you've heard already, Michael has been helping to educate Central Ohio about what is to come and what came before it. So with that, please join me in welcoming Michael Wilkos, who also has the best t-shirt you've ever seen.
Thank you, Mayor Ben. So this evening, we're going to have a panel conversation, and we want to just get right into the meat of what is the future of transportation in Central Ohio. But before we do that, I want to get a little bit of context of how did we get to 2024. Winding the clock back personally, in 1991, I'd finished graduate school, and I was interested in joining the Peace Corps. And I wanted an urban planning assignment, and those are hard to get. And so I waited and I waited. I got a professional job that was not fulfilling. And all of a sudden, I got an email that said, be in Miami, Florida in 2 weeks. There's a position in Santiago, Chile. Get down here for training. And there was this gentleman by the name of Cleve Ricksecker, who at the time ran the Short North Business Alliance. And he said, why go all the way to Santiago, Chile, when you can do peace work here right in Columbus? And I became a director of something known as the Capital City Transit Coalition. And I worked in the basement of a former funeral home at 3rd and High, trying to organize community advocacy for light rail. When light rail did not materialize as an idea for implementation, that kind of community support kind of withered away. And for all those years, I've been thinking about what would have happened had we made that decision 33 years ago to invest in fixed guideway transportation, recognizing that we've added nearly 1 million people to this metropolitan region in that time. So why am I still interested in this topic? I studied geography and got a master in urban planning at Ohio State, and for 20 years I've been a grant maker. And at United Way, we have 91 nonprofit partners, and they're all serving people at 200% of the federal poverty level. And to put that in perspective, you could fill OSU Stadium to capacity 4 times with just the people who live in Franklin County who struggle to make ends meet, meaning that they are living on the equivalent of $24,000 a year for a single individual. Those are the people that need access to good public transit. Those are the people that need sidewalks as social justice. And so let's get into some history. So with that, in graduate school, I learned of something called the Rule of 45. After 45 minutes from point A to point B, between where you live and where you work, things really break down. You either change where you work or you change where you live. That's the geography of Rome when the only mode of transportation was your feet, right? So each of these will be at scale, and you'll see what has happened to the way we live each time we look at a new mode of travel. We'll just come over here. Here we have London, because we now have horses, and that changed the distance you can get because of that. Here's Chicago because of streetcars. And by the way, the city of Columbus and the city of Chicago are exactly the same size in land area today. Columbus happens to be in 3 counties and 11 school districts. but we're the same square miles as Chicago. That's what happens with the automobile. That's Atlanta in 2010. From the foot to the horse to the streetcar to the automobile. The way in which we live, the land that we consume, changes dramatically because of those modes of travel. Back in 1953, 71 years ago, the idea for Interstate 270 came about. And there were lots of different routes. The first route, look at that was recommended, was right at Morse Road and Bethel Road. But there was ideas to build a Ford motor plant at 71 and Morse Road. So then it moved further north. There were also other controversies. If you look at that little plane for Port Columbus, which probably had like one flight a day in 1953, you'll see that the original alignment was really going right through Gahanna. Gahanna pushed back, and they moved that alignment. That's why you have that jog around John Glenn Airport, was because those communities organized to change that alignment. You also have another really weird jog on Interstate 70, as we all know, when it gets a little slippery and you do that Interstate 70 right around that Livingston curve. That was also because Bexley pushed back and the alignment of that highway was moved. There are patterns of resourced, wealthy communities that have been able to mobilize and be able to have their voices heard around transportation. But I think it's important for us to remember the following. The last real transportation innovation we had was 71 years ago. And when Interstate 270 finally opened, started construction in 1962, finished in 1975, the Columbus Dispatch did an editorial. It was the highway to nowhere. Why did we need a 55-mile loop around a county that had only 500,000 people compared to 1.3 million today? But that decision irrevocably reshaped the urban geography of our region. It was an idea that nobody voted on, and it was a $1 billion investment adjusted for today's inflation. We're due for some new innovations around transportation. 2017, WOSU Media took on the issue of what it's like to be poor in Central Ohio. And they covered Anita Ross-Vanis. She's a home health aide and lives in Linden, but her job is in Gahanna. And what you see here is the last mile of her commute to work. I used this slide once, just the picture, no captions, no words. And what I said with this image is, social justice is not complicated, and sidewalks are social justice. 3 years later, an executive in Columbus came up to me and said, I'll never forget when you gave that presentation and you wore that t-shirt that said, sidewalks are social justice. That t-shirt did not exist. That phrase was not on the slide. All I did was say, sidewalks are social justice. And that image was emboldened into his memory with such clarity that he says, I can't drive around Columbus now and not see it. Why do I see all these bus stops in front of employment that don't have shelters, that don't have sidewalks? A lot of it is because Columbus and our suburbs continue to annex, and they annex into townships. And those townships don't have the capital improvements that Bexley has. They don't have complete streets. They don't have trees. They don't have sidewalks. They don't have curbs. They do not have human dignity. For the 400,000 people who live in this county who struggle to make ends meet, who would then therefore struggle with transportation, this is not, in my opinion, acceptable. We now have, as Mayor Ben said, an opportunity to do what I will call restorative transportation justice. And it is the first time that we could look at linking us with our feet, linking us on bicycles, and linking us with public transit. And while I lay in bed at night and think about what could have happened 31 years ago, that's the past. I could not be any more excited about what will be on the ballot this fall. In just a second, I'm going to turn it over to Kelsey, who's going to give you some information on Link Us. but here's how I'm going to sell it to you. Because I can sell it, she can't. And I can tell you to vote yes. Mayor Ben may not, but I can. This fall, there will be an $8 billion transportation levy up to all Franklin County voters. I wish it had another zero on the end and it was $80 billion, but it's our opportunity to leverage federal dollars. It's our opportunity to do complete streets, to give people human dignity, and to give people access to jobs, healthcare, and transportation. And Wilkos is going to do these three things: faster, more reliable public transit, safe and expanded bike and pedestrian paths, and affordable access to work and home and entertainment. With that, I'm going to let Kelsey walk through what Wilkos is. After she does that, we have set the stage for history and the future. I'll introduce the rest of the panelists, and we'll get into the meat of the conversation. Kelsey.
Thank you. I think, is that working? I think it's working. Okay, great. Good job. Let's give him a round of applause here. All right, let's see. I was tinkering with these behind the scenes, so let's see if that worked. Here's not to. So let's do the fun part where I don't talk yet, and you just look at this for a moment. All right, today, COTA can kneel, deploy a ramp. There's an accessibility issue, maybe a stroller, as some people you might know need soon. But this, you just roll on smoothly, more inclusive. Got a level boarding platform there. You've got off-board fare payment, so no more stuffing that crinkly dollar in, a handful of change. We've all seen it. Some of us have actually done it. And all of this, all these different design elements, that dedicated right-of-way, really essential to keeping our buses on time and to keeping them moving. I think it was maybe a month or two ago, I heard our county engineer say, we are not building any more roads. So if we're welcoming between 750,000 or 1 million people by 2050, that means we need to maximize our efficiency of those roads and think about how we move more people along them. For us, we think it's bus rapid transit is how we do it. So I'm going to go back to the beginning here. So this map is evolving, but there is substantial work that has already been done on this. As you've heard, we are intending to put an initiative on the ballot for the fall that'll require a vote of COTA's board, and we expect that will happen soon. The deadline to do that is August. West Broad Street is the corridor that is in design. It is already raking in lots of grant dollars, just recently $42 million for the Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant from the federal government. That's about at 60% design. East Main Street, where we are now, is just over a 30% design, and we're entering the detailed design phase where we really start to care about the different shapes and designs of the roadway itself. Northwest is Olentangy River Road to Bethel and Sawmill and out through the educational and workforce campuses of Dublin. And then you've got these green lines. And I just want to take a step back to say that there's about a decade's worth or more of study involved in bringing this to life here. And so when we look at these other opportunities to have corridors, because Wilkos can fund a total of 5, as you're reading on the right, we're exploring these as some main candidates for how to do that. But we also know places like Grove City is diversifying, but lots of seniors, lots of jobs. All of those things shout out to COTA like a place we should be, right? So we're really looking at where do we need to have a good transportation system. All in all, this would equate to a 45% increase in our service hours over 2019 levels. What does that include? That includes servicing, again, up to 5 corridors, which will have very high frequency, have those larger articulated buses so that they can carry more people, again, because we need to maximize our efficiency of our roadways. But it also includes things like an on-demand zone. Has anyone ever ridden COTA Plus here? Okay, great. So it's free for students, discounted for seniors, also free to anyone who wants to use it to connect to a transit stop. It is a surgeless Uber or Lyft-like service. Okay? It exists in the south side of Columbus, in Westerville, and in Grove City. But we also know we can fund up to 8 zones, around 8 zones by 2050 with that service. And that'll be really helpful, especially in the suburban context where there isn't just the density that really makes a fixed route useful. But then finally, within that 45% increase, also that includes our underlying fixed route service that we have today, making sure that, where I live in North Linden, I might be able to get to a great service that's going to turn into 15-minute service on Morse Road come May, but I have to wait for an hourly bus on the 11 to do it first. Well, how do we actually make all of that faster too? That's the connective tissue that'll continue to really matter, even as we roll out this premium bus rapid transit service. Did that? I think I'm going completely out of order, so don't get nauseous here, folks. Housekeeping slide. This is COTA's service territory. We know that even people outside of the service territory come in and use COTA, right? So we know that our impact is much larger than this. But this is where we're actually allowed to run service, so it sets the boundaries of where those BRT, that bus rapid transit service, can live. It's almost a one-for-one of Franklin County, but if you see those dashed lines, it's any other municipality that's signed our charter, like Bexley has. Reynoldsburg has Licking County territories, so we actually have their Licking and Fairfield County portions as well. All right, now I think I've gone to the start. Going back to where I began, this was, again, a cool slide. Please keep referencing that. And then this is from West Broad Street. Have you ever driven down West Broad? I think many have. It does not look this pleasant, right? It does not look this pleasant. And if you think about what it would feel like to be a person, you might try avoiding walking if possible. That happens everywhere across this region, and we can design for people to embrace using their feet, using a bike, scooting, whatever the kids come up with next, or we hope using bus rapid transit or underlying fixed route network. So this is just a snapshot of what our station would look like. I won't pull up a slide specifically for it just in the interest of time, but we've got the sleek design. You can see that also sleekly designed vehicle on a dedicated right-of-way. We've got an island, a snowmelt pavement for as long as that remains relevant in our region. We've got Wi-Fi. We can't close the digital divide, but by golly, we can do our best to help close it a little bit. And then there will be public art at our stations. So thank you, Mayor Ben, for giving us, actually it was, Michael, where are you? There you are. Oh my gosh, so many friends in this room, I can't keep track. You already gave us the nutshell of boom, 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 what is it? So COTA is really proud to support this as a transit project, but we know that people are just not all living in a place where a corridor is an appropriate place to land in. So if that's not you yet, then we want to make sure that you're fully ready to embrace getting out and walking. How do we get rid of this expectation that even I have walked around with, where I want princess parking, as we call it, the free parking right in front of the place you want to go. It's nice, right? But we don't need it. We can be healthier without it. We can enjoy the sights of our local scenes here. So TSI is transit supportive infrastructure. It's those sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that are going to add to that connective tissue I talked about, so that if you are someone who wants to use transit, that you actually have the complementary infrastructure available to you to do that in a safe, convenient, and dignified fashion. My first internship involved me taking the 2 from Ohio State to 161 and either walking or unhitching my bike to Huntley and Sinclair. That involved walking in the dirt for a section of it. I don't think I looked that fancy, right? So how do we dignify this experience? And we think that will make everyone want to ride. So just reminding you, transit at the heart, the infrastructure that supports transit use, which is sidewalks, bikeways, and trails, and then this really cool thing called transit-oriented development, which is just a wonky way to say that when we make our communities more walkable, that walkability also lends itself to people wanting to use transit. So this is just an example from Cleveland. They have something called the Health Line, and it demonstrates the power of rapid transit to have a major economic development impact which at the end of the day, whether you're using transit or not, is good for our communities, especially if you're looking for a place to put all these people and jobs that are going to come with our growth. We don't want to grow out. We want to grow smartly and put things in the appropriate context. In Cleveland, they saw for every dollar that they invested, they found it $190 in economic impact. We want some of that too. And normally I have another slide here. Why not? So I'll just say, there we go. So this is just an important reference. When we talk about Link Us, it is moving us to providing a premium service, and that requires additional resources. Today, COTA is funded by 0.5%, 0.5% of sales tax. And when we do think of Link Us, we want to provide, we want to draw down, we want to make use of a 1%. So from 0.5 to 1%. That's commensurate with what other cities in Ohio who provide rapid transit use to run their service, and we know we need something similar. We don't just want it to have it. We have a historic level of federal grants available to catalyze this investment that we want to make. It's $8 billion between the fall and 2050, but they don't let you just have $650 million. They want to know that you have the local resources and planning done to run stellar service, and that's where the local funding comes in. Also makes us competitive because we're not the only region who wants bus rapid transit. I know Minneapolis wants to be the BRT capital of the nation, and I mean, come on, they need a Central Ohio challenger for that. So, so this is just, again, another little bit of housekeeping of what it takes to do Link Us. This is my last slide here. Let's just say it is because we've been back and forth a few times here. So would you like to take over again?
Are we ready to?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So let's come up. We're going to get the panel up on stage. What I took away from that is Columbus is trying to catch up to Cleveland. Think about that. Which, by the way, once had 905,000 people and go down to 360,000. Question? They have BRT and train. So. They do. RTA. All right. Okay. Oh, yeah, where's my water? Oh, there it is. Oop. So now let me actually introduce the credentials for this fine panel of folks. You've already heard from Kelsey. Kelsey is the Director of Local Government Affairs at the Central Ohio Transit Authority. As a dedicated member of the Central Ohio community experienced in local civic and public policy landscape, Kelsey plays a critical role in driving COTA's priorities forward through advocacy and partnerships with valued community stakeholders and elected officials. She has a long history of serving Central Ohio, previously working as a legislative aide at Columbus City Council, serving in public policy roles for the Ohio House of Representatives and the Ohio Department of Education, as well as working on campaigns for the Ohio Democratic Party, U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, We Are Ohio, and more. To my right is Stevie Passamonte. She is a lifelong public transit rider and advocate for abundant and equitable mobility options in Central Ohio. And I'm sorry, I used a gender pronoun of she. I meant to say they. Their work is centered in community and draws from their background as an organizer around racial and economic justice. It is informed by their experience living across the country in towns and cities, both replete and lacking in safe, affordable ways to move around. Stevie has lived in Columbus since 2009, and she has served as the board chair for Transit Columbus since 2022. And to my left is Elliot Lewis, professional engineer and senior planner with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. He specializes in multimodal transportation planning and funding. Elliot is part of the team responsible for maintaining MORPC's short-range transportation improvement program, evaluating projects for federal funding awards, and coordinating with other departments to advance the goals of the long-range metropolitan transportation plan. In addition, he leads the planning for the Transit Supportive Infrastructure Fund, part of the $8 billion Link Us Mobility Initiative, as well as the effort to reintroduce passenger rail service to the Columbus region. As you can see, we have a great panel of folks who are very educated and skilled in this topic. So I'm going to start real quick to say, what personally motivates you to be committed to this issue? And I'll start with you, Stevie.
All right. Hello. Thanks, everyone. I'm so excited to be here tonight. What personally motivates me, I think we covered a little bit in my bio. I'm a lifelong public transit rider. My family immigrated to the United States in 1992, and everywhere we lived, which was pretty much across the U.S., we relied on public transit to get around. And not just public transit, but also walking, riding bicycles, any means to get from A to B. And so much of that experience was similar to what Michael had up here before, of just walking on the side of the road. And when you have that experience as a child, it really does shape you. So the reason that I do this work, a big part of it is drawing on those experiences and making sure that other people don't have to go through that.
You, Elliot.
Well, that's a good question. So I'm originally from West Virginia, and so growing up, my interaction with transportation was either on a winding 2-lane road or a school bus. That's about it. And then I went to college at West Virginia University, and there's a fun little transit thing there called the Personal Rapid Transit. It's very interesting. I wouldn't say it should go everywhere, but it really just opened my eyes to, oh, you can do something different? Like, you can get around in different ways, and it shapes how your destinations or origins, where you're going, how that's developed, and how those two intertwine. I became fascinated ever since, and then that fascination, turned into professional. You understand, okay, this isn't just fun, but it also meets reality in every day. And it's not just, oh, it's cool SimCity stuff, but it's how do people get to the doctor when they can't drive and they don't have any family to take them somewhere? Or how do you get to a job if you're working third shift on the other side of town? And so it's where that reality meets the very interesting concepts of the dynamics between land use and transportation.
Great, thank you. And you, Kelsey.
Let's make sure I turn this on. Great, I did. Points. For me, it's interesting. I actually came into my work at COTA as more of a generalist, someone who's just really passionate about public institutions working, and also doing my part to beat back this disillusionment people feel about government. We can do really cool things together, but we have to believe that we can. But when I got here, I was just amazed that transit connects to everything I ever cared about, whether that's childcare. Fun fact, 90% of brain development happens before the age of 5. We need to make sure that people can access childcare in school or other centers, absolutely essential. But just it really showed me that this is a place where together, otherwise, we're confronting the loss of public spaces, where transit is one of the remaining places where people come together. You have to see your neighbor. If there are problems in your community, if there are artists and beautiful things and struggle, they all come together on transit. There's no hiding it. And to ride it is to confront your community identity. So it really has mattered to me in that regard. But also, as I think about the fact that the average household in Franklin County is spending, on average, $12,700 annually, like a mortgage payment, like a cheap mortgage payment, on their transportation costs. I just think that we can do better than that. I'm from New York State originally, about an hour and a half north of New York City, second to last stop on the Metro North rail tracks, so I hear you. But there was a point where my mother was commuting an hour and a half each way to work. And just as I think about the power of transit as a resource, I think about the power of the family unit and what would I have done with 3 hours of more of a parent every day. These are the kinds of things that we have the power to control together, to not become a region of super commuters, because we are providing a low-cost transportation option so people can confront housing costs that are raising. These are all the things we can do together. So I just feel that I am in a moment with this community, and we really need to do something with this opportunity.
So the next question is for anyone on the panel. How did we get here in 2024 where the automobile is king in the American city and there are few options to get around? Columbus is not too different than Indianapolis or Charlotte, where the cities have really been built around the car. How'd that happen?
Well, there are a lot of factors, but one big one is we are in the Midwest and we have an abundance of flat land that was cheap at one point, and you showed the rule of 45 and the introduction of automobiles, how much further out you can get. And then couple that with financial mechanisms in housing and workforce things, and how you can basically drive till you qualify and get a cheap mortgage. And that's that too. And so it was easier here just to keep going further out. And then when you have something like the Outer Belt built, you said it was built when there was about 500,000 people here. Well, think about between that period and now where a lot of that growth, especially like in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, happened. It kept happening on the fringe near the Outer Belt, going further and further out and gobbling up precious farmland, watersheds, things like that. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Maybe it's because I'm from a mountain state, but there you go.
I'm going to take kind of a different approach to that question. I think specifically in the past couple of decades when we have known and continue to know that automobiles are not the best form of transportation for so many reasons, for reasons of safety, of health, of community, I think kind of how we got here is a little bit of a lack of imagination. I think that we tend to look at what we have now and say, this is just how it is. Instead of looking at what we could have, how we could change that, looking at other places and saying we can be that, we can do that, or we can even do something different and better. So I think a lot of how we get here in 2024, even after decades of seeing other cities make these transformations and even in some cases having access to opportunity to change that, it's just a sort of inertia and a lack of imagination where we could be thriving. We are instead just moving forward in the same path. And so I would encourage everyone in this room to just sit and imagine the places that make you most happy, that make you most joyous, and what that looks like. And I guarantee it's not sitting in a car in traffic on I-70 or wherever it is. I guarantee it's some place where you're connected with people and things that you love, where you're connected with your community, both physically and socially. And when you think of transportation, when you think of housing, when you think of all of these things, think of that and reach for that. And that is how we get to a much better place. That's how we get to things like Linkus.
And so, Kelsey, has the federal government equally funded public transit as they have with highways?
No. Thank you. Wow, that was the best softball question I've ever gotten. No, but again, today they have historic levels of grants available, and we want to make use of them. We see, I think I already heard there are some rail evangelists in the room. Again, I'm with you. I believe in all sorts of options. The more we have choices and we don't just get shunted into having to drive a car all day. I think that's what's best for our community. But right now, there's a lot of money on the table, and we want to make sure we bring it back here. Our grant strategy is a huge piece of making sure that Linkus happens. Yes, it requires local skin in the game, and that's why we're going to be asking for it. But there's a lot nationally that we can just bring back home, and we think that's very important. It's worth noting, as just a quick aside, that it's not just the federal government that is that way. We are so excited that our friends at the state are trying to think about how transit can be used in ways it hasn't on our roads and highways that they're responsible for. But even their funding is targeted towards cars. If you go to Minnesota, their transit agencies receive a very substantially much larger amount of money from the state. And here it's on local communities to make the choice or not.
Just listening to you, I was reminded how quick it was between the Intel announcement and all of a sudden I saw construction equipment on the 161 bypass adding another lane. It felt like all of a sudden within months of that announcement, all of a sudden 4-lane highway was becoming a 6-lane highway, and I thought, ooh, if transit projects could get that fast track, we'd be in a different place. So how does Columbus compare to other similar cities? I mean, we are a growing city. In the last 12 years, we've added 263,000 people to our metropolitan region, while the rest of the state has lost 20,000 people. Clearly, we're going to continue to grow, but is Columbus tracking with other similar cities across the country with regard to investments in transit, sidewalks, and complete streets? Any sense of that?
I mean, we're lagging behind quite a bit compared to where we were 10 years ago, let alone now when we're growing so fast. I mean, look at peers like Cleveland or Indianapolis that now have multiple bus rapid transit lanes, or other areas that have gone through transit expansions or just expansions in multimodal infrastructure, period. So it's not just, oh, let's keep building roads. And we're the fastest growing large metro in the Midwest. And we fight with Indianapolis and I guess Fort Wayne with that right now. But we're growing leaps and bounds. And I think you saw on the Wilkos slide that the way that we fund our transit locally is about half that of Cleveland and Cincinnati, not even to compare our peers in other states. And so we could be doing a lot more yesterday and today, and we absolutely need to be doing a lot more in the future.
Are there cities that the two of you admire in what they're doing and wish Columbus could emulate those markets?
I think we've brought up Minneapolis a couple of times tonight, wanting to be the bus rapid transit capital, which I think is a great goal. And I think actually it should be everyone's goal, and we can all compete for that and kind of see what happens. And one of the great things about Minneapolis is they recognize that bus rapid transit is the solution for the space that they have. They have the opportunity for light rail, they have the density for light rail, but they also know that in a region that they want to connect more quickly and make sure that they have an actual network of rapid transit, BRT is the way to go, right? Because it is cheaper to implement, it is more flexible to implement, it uses existing technology that is proven to work, and to have a good mix of that, and then again to add in that transit supportive infrastructure like bike lanes, like sidewalks, other means of mobility to help connect. That's the type of future that I would love to see here in Columbus.
So Kelsey, I've lived in Columbus 35 years, and I think of the handful of times I've had the opportunity to go to the ballot box and always vote for COTA, but it was about COTA. Wilkos is not about COTA. Tell us how Wilkos is so much different than past levies, which were just about the bus.
Thank you. That is a great question. So I believe I joined COTA in 2022. So I'm still growing expertise about our long history in this community. But our last levy was for COTA's general purposes. We highlighted a few things in there about serving the disabled community, providing, I think, some on-demand services. But otherwise, it was just about what we could do in our own house. I keep mentioning these historically large grants that are available. That kind of changes the game here. If you want to apply to the FTA to bring down one of these $150 million grants, we want to get 5 of them, right, 1 per corridor, then they want to understand how are you going to work with the Bexleys, the Columbuses of the world. We don't control their right-of-way. So if we need it to look differently, then we have to have a solid collaboration. So number one, it's that the local revenue is catalyzing federal grant opportunities that have these requirements in place, and for good reason. But the other part of this that we've just taken it upon ourselves to do, because at the end of the day, if we can rip down our silos, better outcomes happen for residents, right? So we lobbied to change Ohio Revised Code so that COTA can invest in that transit supportive infrastructure I told you about, the sidewalks, bikeways, and trails, right? So a portion of the overall levy amount would go towards that purpose. It's actually 27.5%. Don't make me explain why that's the number. But we have signed an MOU with MORPC because they're a trusted and just amazing convener in the region to bring together all of the municipalities in COTA's service territory to do a version of participatory budgeting. Say, what do you want to use these dollars for that enhances your residents' connection to transit and improves their mobility locally? So that's the key difference between what we've done before and what we are doing today.
Right. So some people, I mean, sales tax is regressive. And there may be people that say, I don't like sales tax. I mean, I like transit, but I don't think it should be a sales tax. Why are we using a sales tax to invest in transit?
Well, there are a couple of reasons. Again, I'm not going to cite Ohio Revised Code to you all night, I promise. I like you. But COTA can use property or sales tax. Those are the options. And when you think about who uses COTA, who benefits from COTA, actually a lot of people who do not live in our service territory, who come in to work. And having a sales tax allows us to have those who are participating in the use of COTA or receiving the benefits of it to pay for it in terms of sales tax. There are also many other users of property taxes we want to be mindful of, including our schools. But the other piece just to put alongside that is there are drawbacks to any kind of taxation policy we would have, is that COTA has the opportunity and the duty to have past programs like our low-income assistance program or veterans or senior programs where we actually are able to lower those costs for those who need it. About half of our riders are low-income individuals, so they are actually benefiting quite substantially from using the service disproportionately as well. So that is just how I would contextualize that.
I will go into the state level stuff just a little bit. If you look at how budgets work in Ohio, there is the sort of the transportation budget and the everything else budget. And the transportation budget is a little bit of a misnomer because actually what that is the highways budget, right? And that is something that long term, if we're talking about being more imaginative, we should work to fix. That's not something that is going to specifically directly affect this levy. It's something that is going to take a very long time to change and a lot of effort on everyone's part. But just so you all are aware of that, that is something we can and should try to change so that future projects and extensions of Wilkos and everything around that can move forward without having to have these regressive taxes.
So looking at you now, Elliot, because you at MORPC look at many counties across the metropolitan region and recognizing that when I look at the population statistics in the last decade, 70% of the metropolitan growth of the Columbus region occurred in Franklin County as that growth of the region really moved inward. One of the things I noticed on the map that Kelsey had was the line for Franklin County and Delaware County was not a smooth line like it typically is. I saw it was kind of squiggly. So we've got things like IKEA and Polaris Mall and 19,000 people at JP Morgan Chase on Polaris Parkway. How do we serve that area? Does it fall within Wilkos? And what happens outside this service area as the region continues to grow further out as Franklin County kind of fills up?
Yeah, that's always a tough nut to crack. Now, you know, those areas, if they're within the city of Columbus, if they're within the city of Westerville or Dublin, those are charter cities who sign on to COTA's charter, their entire municipal boundary, not just in Franklin County, are included in COTA's service area and would be eligible for all of these things. And so, like, you know, Polaris, yes, you know, that area would be included. But we also work with our friends up in Delaware County, with Delaware County Transit. They have seen explosive growth in terms of population, yes, but also ridership. And they have a very imaginative and assertive plan to expand their service, expand their frequency, and increase ways to work with COTA where they can in terms of transfers. Right now, we're pretty hamstrung in most areas of how we can do cross-county service. So basically, with the way the funding is, it becomes a lot more expensive to the point where it's infeasible to run a bus from here out to Licking County and back versus from one end of this county to the other. Again, won't bore you with the Ohio Revised Code and things like that, but that's something else that we're looking at in terms of a longer-term strategy. But right now, it's all about trying to coordinate with existing partners in Licking County, in Delaware County, and other workforce shuttles that go to industrial areas. Make sure all that stuff is connected in time. That if you do take a 2-seat ride somewhere, you don't have to wait long. And if you do have to, unfortunately, wait long, which is not the hope, you have a comfortable, safe, secure place to wait that have other services with you. It's not exactly the same thing in terms of cross-county thing, but COTA last year broke ground on a mobility center down the Rickenbacker area. And it is chock full of different services, from educational spaces to a food pantry to childcare spaces for people who work very odd hours, that they can have access to things they need that once they get home they might not have access to, either due to where they live or the time in which they get there.
Just to add on to it, I think this is just a good moment for reflection. Back when I worked in the city of Columbus, we would talk about being the blue dot in a red ocean. We all are familiar with this urban-rural divide. There's some of that that's true, but actually there's a lot of myth in that. We are deeply connected already today in many different ways. But sometimes it takes something like Intel to come in to really disrupt our thinking on things. And it's doing that in ways that I'm sure will be unwelcome, but also are really catalysts for the change we need to see. I think we're seeing that with our state level partners as well. Even today, COTA has an executive on loan, as we call it, Matt Allison, a former COTA operator turned chief transit operator, who's running the show out there, helping Licking County Transit to move from walking to running with everything that's going on out there. We have a whole area of work at COTA called our County Connections, whether it's for Intel, for Aetna, for Rickenbacker. We see the need to again think beyond our silos to create seamless journeys for residents. When we do that, everybody wins.
So years have gone into planning and design. We've got West Broad, East Main, Olentangy River Road. How are these selected? How soon might we see those 3 corridors materialize if the Wilkos levy passes? And what is the process to look at those additional routes beyond those 3 that have been identified?
Can I look to you for that? I mean, I can say.
Yeah, you can always look to me. I don't know if I'll answer.
So there is a very significant process that's involved in choosing any one of these. Mm-hmm. It's actually a similar process if we want to talk about rail, right? It's what is the population density? What development is online? What is coming, right? What does ridership look like? That goes into any decision about these. We also have to go through a process with the federal government to choose the right mode. So a fun fact that I like to recite from time to time is that although the city of Columbus may be the 14th largest city, there was a fun governing article published just a bit ago that did a little bit more about population density. We're actually 261st. So the things that we know make us eligible to succeed in a competition for grants for bus rapid transit. It's the same eligibility criteria for rail, but we're going to need to meet even higher standards for that. So all of that density, that population growth, that all comes into play. But then, of course, again, like I mentioned about just exploring, do we need a Grove City line? We care about everyone being able to ride transit and benefiting from the service, but we really look to our seniors, to low-income people, to make sure we're serving diverse populations in an equitable fashion. All of that comes into play when we choose one place or another to go as well.
Yeah, and with apologies to past light rail planning and stuff, when we look at the mode of bus rapid transit, something I always say is, you basically get 80% of the ridership benefits per mile for 20% of the cost. And so that would allow us, instead of building one rail line, which is great, I do love that, we could build 5 bus rapid transit lines and actually get quality service, frequent service out to all parts of the region and not just concentrate and focus on one. I think that is a more than worthwhile thing to do, to be able to say that, yes, we are investing in the entire region for that. But you asked, how did the West Broad and East Main and Northwest get selected for all the things that Kelsey said too? Because we're able to build multiple lines at one time, we look at the network effects of this too. And so it's not just one corridor in isolation. How does it work with the other corridors that we're looking at? How does it work with our existing fixed route and COTA Plus service? So some people have asked, why are you putting a line up to the northwest up towards Dublin? They don't need anything. Those people were from Hilliard. They always said that. But that is, when we talk about job density, overall, this low, that's the highest area of job density. It goes through Ohio State's campus. It goes up past Riverside Hospital. It goes up to a lot of high concentration retail and service areas up towards Dublin, along Bethel. And yes, you have, some other areas that might need to go to downtown, but you have other people who need to go north as well. And so it's not just connecting everyone to downtown, it's looking and see how does this all mesh together.
So in a few minutes, we're going to have a dialogue with all of you. So be thinking about the questions, because I know you probably have lots of big picture and maybe more tactical things, and we want to get that interaction going. Before we do that, I would like each of you to respond to the following question. What happens to Central Ohio if Wilkos doesn't get implemented or passed?
I think this is one area where you don't really have to use your imagination. I think there are plenty of examples of cities that have grown, and they've grown around car-centric infrastructure. You can look at Austin. You can look at Atlanta, that big sprawling thing. There's a funny thing online that people in Atlanta like to say is like, why does it take me 1 hour to get from Atlanta to Atlanta, right? You're just crossing the same city, and you're stuck in a car the whole time. So I think that, just on a sort of black and white scale of like Wilkos versus not, that's what you get. But I think an even more interesting question here is what happens when you only get sort of pieces of Wilkos, right? So we're talking about this as like, this is just bus rapid transit. It's not just bus rapid transit, as we've discussed. It's that equitable transit-oriented development. It is all of the supporting pieces that comes with transit supportive infrastructure, right? So not just those lines, but also housing, also trails and bikeways, also just better sidewalks. All of those things that really make Wilkos what it is all of them together is what makes it important. And so without those different elements, you have sort of a system that begins to kind of chip away at itself. And what we don't want is to say, okay, great, we've got these bus rapid transit lines, and sure, we'll do a couple of bikeways, and then that'll be great. No, we need the infrastructure around, not just around those transit corridors, but throughout the city, throughout the region, in order to get that. And so I want to go back to something that Michael said at the very beginning of this, as we were looking at those maps and talking about why certain highways went around cities like Bexley, which is that resource-rich communities have a greater ability to advocate for these types of things. And what I would challenge you all here in Bexley to do is not just to vote yes, which you should, for Wilkos, but to go out into your own community and advocate for those extra things like bike lanes, like sidewalks, all of those things. I know that in the past couple of years, Bexley's had kind of a problem getting bike lanes approved throughout the city. That's in the past. We can do better. We should do better. And it improves all of this stuff that we're investing all of this money into. That's going to be made even greater by looking at those things and saying, hey, this, even though this is not part of Link Us, it is part of Link Us. It is part of getting us all to those rapid transit corridors and getting anywhere else in the region we want to go.
Kelsey, what happens if Link Us doesn't happen? What's Columbus going to look like in 2050 without Link Us?
You know, maybe it's silly, I always like to talk about the loss of elbow room on our roads and off, with almost 1 million more people coming here. It just will look different to move around. Lots of things will look different. And I think of my mother being in a car for 3 hours a day, supporting me. I want a different future for the neighbors that I don't yet have and the neighbors that I do in North Linden and elsewhere. I'm concerned about sprawl, and Link Us is designed to allow us to capture the growth that happens and funnel it into a denser, smarter planned development than what would otherwise happen. I really would like us to see us use those tools. Just to repeat a couple of things again, it's talking about nearly doubling COTA service hours. That's significant. That is frequency. It's late service, late night service, which everyone loves, and it would be great to be able to provide that. And just the other piece that we haven't really talked about is just the environmental piece. Transportation is the largest and fastest growing source of emissions. And COTA is actually 0.5% of those emissions. But when COTA expands its operations and creates a more convenient and faster service, we enable this thing called mode shift. It means we get people to actually take up that resource and not be part of that polluting sector, right? So as long as climate change, if we purport to care about it, this is a really important tool to be able to adjust our impact accordingly.
So what I keep thinking about is if we don't do something different, that means we're stuck with the status quo. And status quo has largely been keep building roads. I mean, if you build another lane, more cars go there. It's fluid. It's induced demand. It's a reality. But I also think about the disparity of systemic outcomes. So we talk about environmental sustainability. We talk about affordability, where you can live, where you can work. I mean, Kelsey said earlier, people are spending $12,000 on transportation, right? And car payments alone have gotten higher and higher and higher, and insurance. And I'm thankful that I have access to my own car, but many people don't now, and fewer are going to be able to in the future. And so if we continue to focus just on a car-centric way to get around and a way to build, what's going to happen is the people who can afford it are going to be fewer and fewer, and they're the only ones going to reap the benefits. And so if we keep building out this infrastructure, we're going to get increased stormwater runoff. We're going to get increased air emissions. And even if we go to EVs, you're still going to get brake pad dust and tire particles that are awful for your heart and lungs. And these are largely concentrated in places that have already felt the impacts and have been devastated by past generations' decisions to locate the interstates where they are in other areas. And so that's, speaking for myself, that's an immoral thing to do. Like we have a moral imperative to think about something much different than what we have.
So now I'm going to come down and with the microphone and see what's on your minds. But before I do that, I want you to think that Bexley already is kind of a Link Us vision, right? You have walkable streets, you have sidewalks. Main Street is worthy of human affection. One of my most famous quotes from James Howard Kunstler is, if we don't build cities worthy of human affection, we won't have cities that people care about. Main Street in Bexley is very different than Hamilton Road in Eastland. Hamilton Road at Eastland is unworthy of human affection because that road was built only for the car. And as soon as the mechanical ability for a chain store to make money on Hamilton Road ended, they just walked away from that real estate. And what did they leave us with? A place that isn't really worth fighting for because of the way it looks. And so I'm going to do a little pop quiz. If the election were tomorrow and you had the opportunity to vote to build an outer belt, how many of you would want to vote yes on that? Case closed. All right. What's on your minds? Raise your hand if you've got a question. Oh, we got a young man right in the front. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brian Williams, and my question may ramble, but I'll try and keep it short. It's about the transportation and the land use, and I think with looking at Intel, the bus rapid transit, that's a long way from downtown. For a lot of other things, existing, that works. Do we need some sort of rail up there? A quick aside, anybody know what the first interurban line in America was? Newark, Ohio to Granville, Ohio. So we have Intel up there, we have Newark, we have Delaware, we have Columbus. Is there, would some sort of rail up in that area through Intel make some sense? And would that help shape the development there? Is it, the way all that's being developed, is that conducive to bus rapid transit?
Oh, Brian, I forgot to say that Newark line connected to Bexley.
So I think ultimately this goes back to that density conversation. And the answer is, in the long term, probably yes. In the short term, what we need to do is build that density, and not just in Columbus, but also out by Intel, and also out in all of the suburbs surrounding Columbus and in this region, right? So we often think of this, again, that sort of tension between like the urban and the rural, the urban and the suburban. But if you look at the way things worked prior to cars kind of taking over, what you had was these sort of what they call streetcar suburbs, right? Where you have that inner city density. Yeah, right here, Bexley. So you have that inner city density, and then you also have that suburban density. Just because you live in a suburb doesn't mean it has to be strip malls. It can be a beautiful, walkable, bikeable place where people love to be outside, love to be in community with one another. And then you have those forms of transit like bus rapid transit or like light rail that connects you between those existing networks. And so, we're trying to do kind of both at once here, where it's like, yes, we're building the corridors to connect those different communities, and we want to build out those communities to be sort of self-sustaining, and to be places where people want to go. And so you don't end up with something like, okay, everyone's sure living in the sort of density of Columbus and then going out into nowhere where Intel might sort of float in the world. That sucks. That's awful. We don't want that. So if we want density, not just along those corridors, but in the places where things are happening.
Yeah, to add, because you asked about rail, and I will always have to talk about rail. I like it. It's fine. So right now we're planning to bring back passenger rail to Central Ohio for the first time since the 70s. It's been a while. I wish we had it yesterday, right? That type of service isn't really conducive to actual commuting out to Intel and things like that. Also, where Intel sits would require brand new tracks along new right-of-way, which gets incredibly expensive very quickly. Doesn't mean it's not, potentially a good thing, but right now the cost effectiveness for that isn't here. If you want to talk about distance between, where people need to get within the greater Columbus area out to Intel, I would actually counter and say that something like a express bus service does actually work on that, because you have access to the highways, you have access to go more than 40 miles an hour to get out to this area. Now, all of that to say, everything that we talk about, advocating for bus rapid transit as a mode doesn't preclude any additional changes and upgrades in the future as well. But for today and to 2050 and beyond, this is what makes the most sense for our region.
Hi, I'm Craig. I am a local resident, and my wife is a small business owner who's based right on Main Street. And as we've talked about supporting some of these alternate forms of transportation besides cars, one part of that discussion is us changing where parking infrastructure is based and replacing it with some of these other forms of multimodal transportation and things that are more sustainable. And in this community, when we talk about that, sometimes people's reaction is, well, if you're taking away those parking spaces, then small businesses will be sabotaged. And I'm wondering if the panel has any thoughts about those concerns and a reaction to that when people bring up those concerns.
So could you just clarify what the nature of your small business?
The nature of what?
Your small business, what kind of business?
Oh, my wife owns an acupuncture clinic on Main Street.
Great.
Yeah.
So I would like to start by saying that all of the literature on this, all of the studies that have come out in the past several years say that mass transit and pedestrian zones actually attract more clients, more shoppers than street parking. And in fact, sometimes an abundance of street parking actually hurts. And if you think about that for a minute, imagine yourself on Main Street and how easy it is to actually see the shops there. It's kind of difficult because you've got a row of cars blocking you, right? And I think that, as cars get bigger and bigger and bigger, which they have, I mean, there are trucks out here the size of a house, it seems like, just going down Main Street, right? And so you are actually creating barriers to businesses, between people and businesses. And then if you think about being in a car, if you're in a car, you hopefully are paying attention to the road, paying attention to your surroundings, trying to get to and through a place. You're not looking around at those businesses, right? Like you're looking at, again, hopefully the road. And so when you slow things down a bit and when you remove yourself from that space and when you remove the barriers, what do you start to see? You start to see the community around you. That includes shops and restaurants and public space and all of these things, again, that make a space worthy of that affection and care we have for our community. So not only is there that data that says, hey, all of this stuff actually helps businesses, and even at the very bottom line, just kind of is neutral, doesn't change anything, right? But I also want us to think about the way that we move around in other spaces. So let's say you go to Target, right? You're driving your car, you park in the Target parking lot. How long does it take you to walk from your space in that Target parking lot to Target? Probably about the same amount of time it takes for you to park down the street from that business, not in Princess parking, but maybe just on the block, a couple blocks away. And you're walking through, instead of a Target parking lot, a very nice, lovely street with trees and people and housing and your community, right? So a couple years ago, we actually did a discussion here, and I spoke to a Bexley City Council person who was concerned, understandably, about parking in front of their hairdresser's office building. They said, there's only 2 parking spots there now, already pretty limited. Are you gonna take that away from that hairdresser? To which my response is, are you gonna stop going to your hairdresser because the parking goes away? And she said, no, absolutely not. I've been going there 20 years. So what's the problem, right? So if you have those connections in that community, parking isn't going to stop you from going to your hairdresser, to going to your acupuncturist, from going to your favorite restaurant. It's just going to make you walk a little farther. And if you look at, you can look, we don't even have to look outside of the region to see how better walkability affects our businesses. You can talk to Betsy Pandora in the Short North, where recently they shut down all of High Street for holiday hop this past December, and this is something that they were a little reluctant to do. Like, where are people gonna go? Where are they gonna park? People are coming from out of the short north to come in and shop at these businesses. It was one of the best days of business that they've had down there, and now they wanna do it again and again and again because it's been so successful for them on a business level, on a financial level, on a local and regional economic level. Everything points to this being a good thing for business. Now, you have to convince business owners of that, which I understand is a really difficult thing because this is their livelihood on the line. This is something that can cause a lot of anxiety. So I think, if you are a local advocate or if you are an elected official and you know that this is something that is going to be good for the community, talk to them like they're adults, because they are. People can learn, and you can ease those anxieties by showing them examples, again, around the city, around the country, around the world, of how this is actually really good. Have them do those thought exercises of what would happen if the parking directly in front of your hairdresser went away. Realistically, you parked on the street and you walked down. And again, it's about being imaginative, showing people what the future would look like, and backing that up with data. It's everywhere.
Can I just add just a little bit to that? Because I agree with everything you're saying. But at the same time, the reality is, we talked about mode shift. It's not necessarily mode elimination. We know some people are gonna have to, drive to downtown, to Main Street in Bexley, in order to go to shops and restaurants here. Cards on the table. I drove here today. Thankfully, I had a place to park. But also, this is a great place to walk around, and if I can just drive and park one place, walk around the rest. It's trying to manage that as much as possible and encourage as much mode shift as possible, while still understanding, curb management. How are people going to get their deliveries? How are all the unsexy things about running a business, about your public services. That's all intermingled. And so as we go through and think about how these different modes can fit in different contexts, we take a serious, sober look at making sure that those needs are met, while again knowing that what we really want to do is encourage people to be using transit to get out of their cars, while at the same time knowing we're not going to eliminate every single trip.
We'll go here, and then I'll come to you.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a South Bexley resident. I was just thinking with the recent primary election that we had, where we saw a lot of the school levies fail, what's it going to take for us individually and collectively to get this passed in November?
So the reason I'm looking at my friends is I'm here in my official capacity, so I want to respect the fact that I am. So I'm going to talk about what education and awareness efforts are here. I think you've gotten a snapshot of what benefits come to the community based on the solid plans that have been in the works for basically a decade. So just to tell you a little bit more about that, we have extensive efforts going on to talk to people who are community leaders. We have a whole leadership coalition that involves one group for the municipal leaders steering the funds for the transit supportive infrastructure. We've got one for our workforce partners that the Columbus Partnership is helping to convene people on. We have one around equitable transit-oriented development, which will help evangelize within the builders and dreamers and designers of communities to think about how what they can do can align with Link Us. And then there's the work that I lead for COTA, which is coming out to places like Bexley and talking to Mayor Ben, to your land use panel, to your residents soon on that bus ride I'm looking forward to. I'll be in Canal on Monday. I was in Groveport 2 weeks ago. I was in Whitehall last night. I mean, there should be a world, where in the region is Kelsey Ellingson of me? And I think it comes down to telling your story, giving residents the information they need to answer the question come November.
I think that a lot of it is making people aware that it's happening. I think a lot of people don't know what Wilkos is. And of course, there are folks who stay informed through events like this, but I think just talking about it is step one, right? But don't leave it there. Connect it to the person that you're talking to. So if it is someone, I think sometimes it's as easy as being like, hey, traffic, right? That sucks. You know what would be great? If fewer cars were on the road. Here's how and start to have those discussions everywhere all the time. That's not just around Wilkos, that is around investments in transit in general. But if you have something specific to point to, it's a good starting point, right? I think another way is just informing yourself and getting engaged and understanding how to make those connections. I'm going to do a little plug for an organization called Transit Columbus, of which I am the board chair. So we meet in the city of Columbus in downtown, but we do have folks in Bexley who stay connected with us. Even forming a group here of interested and concerned residents and just saying, hey, what do we want the future of our city to look like? And how do we go about that? I think connecting with established groups who already have audiences is a great way to go about it. And I think to Kelsey's point earlier, transit touches every single thing that we do, right? And so you can talk to environmental folks, of course. You can talk to teachers, right? Say, hey, this is a frustration of getting your students into class. Talk to parents about how dangerous the streets are and how to make them safer. Talk to folks who don't have the same range of mobility as everybody else does, and about how that is going to allow for greater access. There are so many different ways to connect everything you do to transit. So for the people that take that thing that that they're interested in and connect that to Wilkos, and then say, hey, here's the action you can take. There's a ballot initiative, or even get them involved in that kind of advocacy. And I'll say, even if it's someone who likes driving, even if it's someone who wants to have their own car and maintain that, what makes it better for them, a better experience, is to have fewer other cars on the road, right? There is an argument for everyone that connects to this. Find out what that is, start talking to those folks, find the groups in your community that already have those established connections, get involved with them. One of those could be Transit Columbus, one of those could be anything here in Bexley.
And on a very, just basic level, if you want more information beyond what we've said so far about Wilkos specifically, go to wilkoscolumbus.com. It's got plenty of resources, multimedia, or very dry reports, or very exciting reports. There are also ways to get in contact with the planning team in case you have an organization that you'd like, a longer version of the presentation that Kelsey gave to be able to, for us to come out and talk to you as well.
We've got just a few minutes left. We got a couple more questions, including this young man right here.
Okay, so where exactly and how far apart will the stops be?
The stops are about a half mile apart.
Where would they be in Bexley?
I have a slide for that. I don't think I have it here. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Ice cream and bus.
What more can you want?
Thank you.
Sorry. My name's Linda Zupnik, and I've lived here 45 years. Come from New York originally, so I love mass transit. Couple of questions. When you talk about east-west, what happens when you get to the end of where Link? I don't know what happens then. And also, why do you put it on Main versus Broad, and where do you jog? As a resident here, we spend a lot of time and effort promoting our downtown. And then, granted, you're talking about how you can drive by these things and you'll take the time to look. I think that you would have been better to continue on Broad because you're then changing all the things that we've done, the medians, everything else to slow traffic down. And looking at a map of the greater Columbus, the areas that have grown are in the northwest and also way out east. And I have family out there, and they live out there, and they don't come downtown. A lot of the downtown has now turned from offices to residences because people are not working downtown. So I don't know how much this is going to affect your ability to encourage people to vote for this if it doesn't affect those areas that people really need to get to.
So I'm going to try and cover my bases here. So first, I didn't get to mention it before. COTA was awarded a sizable grant from ODOT to study an east-west corridor, not coming down to the convergence, as we call it, of the 5 corridors in downtown Columbus. That would go from basically Dublin out to Intel. Of course, we're not able to accomplish that on our own because it goes out of our service territory, but it's a conversation. So yes, we have a central node in downtown Columbus because that's how we maximize the efficiency of the use of the resources we have. That's one piece here. But the other part is that LinkUs does send benefits to those who are not coming downtown, and even those who are not getting a corridor, and that's through that transit supportive infrastructure, which again is nearly a third of the new revenue we would be seeking through the ballot initiative would be dedicated to that purpose. Again, sidewalks, trails, and bikeways. Okay. In terms of Broad versus Main, and we work with MORPC on deciding all of these. We actually, whenever, this is very wonky, you will forget this and it will be okay. Whenever you're seeking federal dollars, you have to federalize your project by doing a bunch of extra steps that meet the rigor of analysis that they require, that the federal government requires. So part of that is putting it through MORPC's metropolitan transportation planning process, which we did. This, again, predates my time at COTA, but we looked at the things that I told you we looked at earlier, right? Population, development, existing, anticipated. But at the end of the day, there are a couple of things that also help swing it to Main Street. One is that there are multiple municipalities, each who have different preferences about Broad versus Main. And in a world where we need to work together on right-of-way, those opinions matter, right? So it wasn't a clear one way versus the other. And so when you look at the data, there was a better equity argument to be made for locating the corridor on East Main Street as opposed to Broad. And then also when you look at the farther out extent of the line, the city was actually, I think the City of Columbus is who I'm talking about here, increasing the speeds, widening the roads out in the furthest extents, which is actually less conducive to transit. So that was a problem. Back to your I think I went in reverse. Your first question was, what is the end of the line? Well, so those are all gonna look a little bit different. For West Broad Street, we're partnering with Prairie Township. So they are helping us to have a parcel there. And we are able to provide better amenities for our operators and customers there. So think of a restroom. Obviously, if you have a mobility center, you can have better transfers there to other lines. But again, dignify the experience, a place to step out of the cold. We'll have those throughout the system. We'll have one on the Licking County side of Reynoldsburg as well at a site they have a development partner for. So each will look differently, but you can expect, bless you, more amenities at the end of lines. That's where a customer would deboard and then choose another line, or if you're just going for a joyride, ride it back downtown.
I just want to acknowledge the thing that you said about the investments already made on Main Street and the things that have already been done to beautify the street and slow traffic down a little bit. I think, it's important to acknowledge and recognize everything that went into that, and it can be difficult to say, okay, now there's something even better we can change to, right? So I think that, it is not to say that every time there's a new and shiny thing, we should be throwing money at it. But this is a great opportunity to pull down some of those federal funds to make that space even better than you had imagined before, even better than you had created before. And it's not to say that that work just goes away, right? That space has been there for the past couple of years, and it's been really advantageous to the community. Now think about how much better it would be still to have a transit line there, to have more infrastructure that makes it safer for people, have better, safer, more visible sidewalks, and have that ability for folks to come down and really truly enjoy Main Street in that way. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of get lost in like, we've already spent this effort. It's not wasted effort. It's just additional on top of that.
And can I just address one other point that you brought up was, and you very rightly pointed out, there's been a ton of growth on the north side of the county and in Delaware County and a lot on the east. And while that's true, I mean, we're talking about the growth that's happening now, but also the growth to come. We recognize that, take West Broad or parts of East Main, that there are a lot of places there that just have excess capacity, whether you're talking about utilities or actual building sites. And so that would be conducive to transit. And so when we want to try and think of reorienting where this growth could happen, and it's not just sprawl, 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 but it's investing in not just the transit, but the homes and the businesses and everything that you could have, all in a much more walkable and transit-rich environment. That really, we're not saying let's build 50-story towers all along, East Main or West Broad or anything like that, but we have a chance to actually invest in historically disinvested neighborhoods with the focus that, I mean, you saw what we talked about in Cleveland. There's billions of dollars of development that could come from this. Who's actually going to benefit from that development? Who is at risk of displacement? And so we talk about TOD, transit-oriented development. We really focus on equitable transit-oriented development, ETOD. Working and creating an ETOD strategy so that when we think about building transit-oriented development in these areas and being able to have more homes for people who are going to move here regardless, that we do it in a way that people who've lived there for generations don't have to pack up and move because they got priced out.
So it looks like we got 2 more questions. Let's try to get those questions and do quick responses so we can honor people's time. Oh.
The medians wouldn't go away on Main Street.
Oh, okay. That was an easy comment.
It costs $2 to ride today. We have no plans to raise it. That is a decision that goes through our board, so I can't make promises, but the BRT lines would be the same cost as every other kind of bus travel.
And I'm curious, when you said that Bexley is resource rich, and so, you didn't say you should ride the bus. You said, support people, support bike lanes, walking, yeah, we should have sidewalks. But you didn't say ride the bus. Bexley has 3 nice bus routes: Livingston, Main, Broad, and they're not well used at all. So I'm a little bit like, how are you going to get people to ride?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would say is that it's the frequency of service, right? You do need to plan. I live 2 blocks off High Street. I never have to look at the schedule because High Street's got that service. Why are the High Street buses busy? Because you never have to plan your life. There's always Main Street is too. Yeah. But I'm like, and by the way, when I said Columbus and Chicago were the same size, the only part of Columbus that has the population density of Chicago is the University District. The rest of the city is much lower density. So let's do this last question. We'll close this out.
Okay. Basically, I looked at the website, looked at the information. I'm a Main Street business owner myself, right at the intersection Drexel and Main, right near the historic Drexel Theater, which I have a feeling would suffer from not having parking, more frequent parking available. From my understanding on the website, that this would be a transition area so that there would still be parking based on what was listed on the website. Is that still the case, or, okay?
Yeah, so I think it's important to, so we're balancing the transparency of where we are today, but also doing the full-throated advocacy of where we wish we would be, right? So I think whenever I enter any community, and that includes Bexley, because there are other challenges that we face in terms of right-of-way in other places, it's just how do we get to yes? How do we get to the most dedicated right-of-way possible? Because it doesn't just affect Bexley, it affects everyone who's riding that across the entire line. So I think what I have said to you, Mayor Ben, I will say to you here as well, which is that we want to, if we have to get creative, we want to get creative. I think when you're talking about people's livelihoods, again, if I were going to an acupuncture appointment, sir, at your wife's business, I would love to take the bus there, right? I would. But nonetheless, asking people to do things differently and confronting the situations where maybe if you're lugging like a ton of bags, or I don't know what business you're talking about, maybe something does come up. So what are the mitigation strategies we can come up together? I don't think COTA wants to stomp with its big old feet through each community, just rolling out BRT, right? We know that the value of this is very clear, and we think that we can bring everyone along, even those who may cling very dearly to the parking that they have. BRT has a lot to offer that whole stakeholder group as well. So I think, just as I said earlier, we're entering the detailed design phase where we actually have to hammer out some of these details, and moving from vision to action is always hardest. So we're right there right now, and what you're probably referring to is a dashed line where there was the solid line around it. I want all solid lines. That's what we'd love to see happen here, and it's just about how we can work together to do that.
So as we close out tonight, I want to reflect that in the early 1970s, the federal government filed conspiracy charges against General Motors, Goodyear, and Standard Oil because the three of those organizations conspired together, purchased, and dismantled streetcars in 51 US cities. We once had a connected system, but corporate greed and other forces took that away. And they took away walkable communities, and they replaced it with Sawmill Road and Hamilton Road and Bryce Road. And I don't think any of us want to see what happened to Bryce Road is soon going to happen to Route 256 as those big box stores pick up and leave and go to the next road further out. We've seen Livingston Avenue get dismantled. Then you saw Hamilton Road get dismantled. Bryce Road looks like, I don't know, it should be in Youngstown. And 256 is doomed as well. We have to make a choice of what this region is going to look like. And I want to say, Mindy Justice over here, raise your hand. She can take any specific questions because Mindy.
I'm on the Lead Desk engagement team, so any Lead Desk specific questions that you would want to follow up for, I may not have all your answers, but I can make sure that if you didn't get the time to get an answer back to you.
And so, with that, let's say thank you to Elliot, Stevie, and Kelsey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael.